They say that wine gets better with age. Hi, I'm Zach Marr from Alamo Music here in San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications. This is our Alamo Sound Lab channel where we talk about all things music technology related, vintage synths, modern synths, interfaces, microphones, etc. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, hit the subscribe button. You won't be disappointed. Today we are looking at the Minimoog. And with prices approaching $4,000 to $5,000 in the vintage used market, the question is it still a good investment? And especially that question is present with the two kind of pathways to the Moog sound that are available today. One being actually Moog products that are originated from the kind of revived company. I think it got revived in 2005-ish. And the other one being Behringer products, which with the Model D and the Poly D have kind of clones of the originals have given another alternative kind of way to that Moog sound. And so the question is it still a good investment? Is it worth owning? And today, hopefully, we'll be able to answer that. In order to get an answer or to kind of give you the tools to make your own answer, we kind of have to go back in time and talk about the Minimoog and where it fits in this history of synthesizers. So the Minimoog was really the first major commercial success with analog synthesizers, and I think it was first produced in the early 70s, and it ran all the way through the entire decade into the early 80s, and it was the first very powerful kind of miniaturization of the gigantic modular kind of synthesizers of the late 60s and early 70s. It took all that and it put it into this kind of small footprint and was beloved. And so it was highly influential in music all across the 70s and 80s. And you found it, and even into hip hop in today's world, you know. So some of the most famous artists that used it: Gary Newman, Dr. Dre, Bob Marley, Kraftwerk. The list of artists who have used a Moog in kind of very famous songs goes on, and it's kind of amazing how powerful a piece this is in synthesizer history. So it's very, very classic sound. When you hear it, you'll know it, and you'll recognize it in so many different songs. But it really, and even, so that said, even though saying it was a huge success, it really, I think only 12,000 units were produced. And to put that into context, the kind of most popular synth from the 80s, the DX7, to give it as a reference point, I think 200,000 of units were sold of the DX7. So even with its success, it's still not a ton of them made in the history of synthesis. But very cool piece. A little bit about the company. I think it was founded by Robert Moog, who was kind of a genius when it came to synthesizers. But what was interesting about it is it was, from what I understand, never profitable except one year, like 1969. They were woefully unprofitable and kind of eventually went bankrupt in 1987, just as digital synthesis took over and they failed to pivot. Sad story. There's a great history of it online if you're interested in reading more about it. But this instrument is really responsible for so much music and so much inspiration, and it sounds awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the Behringer Poly D, which comes after their Model D that came out, I think, 2 years ago, and was an exact replica from the transistors and the circuitry of the Minimoog. It even added a few features, and you can look online. There's a lot of reviews comparing the two. It is really, really close to being an accurate replica of the Minimoog. And it did, even to the extent where it replicated the filters, which is really what the Moog is most famous for, is the filter that was in side of it, it's very classic. Some argue that no analog filter has ever been created that's been better than what was in here. And what's funny about that filter is that it was an accident. One of the engineers that was responsible for calculating how the schematic should work miscalculated, and it overdrove the circuitry by, I think, like 10 dB or something. And so it was actually a product of miscalculation. And so when they started shipping and noticing it, people were loving the product, like, I just leave it. So it's kind of funny that it was an accidental kind of design element, but it's probably what the Moog is most famous for, is its filter. And so the Model D and the Poly D have done a great job of replicating that. And really the Poly D is like a hot-rodded Minimoog. It adds an oscillator, it adds chorus and distortion effects. The chorus based on kind of the Juno 60 chip, and it adds an arpeggiator and a sequencer, neither of which are present on the original Minimoog. So it's a really, really cool reimagination of the Minimoog, and honestly, when you play it, you get so close that it makes it difficult for me personally to say the Minimoog is a good investment musically. Pause. If you're investing in a Minimoog from a historical standpoint, or from a collector standpoint, or a value standpoint, I don't think it necessarily is a bad investment. 10 to 12,000 units isn't a ton, and many of those have probably are in disrepair, or in pieces. So it is a piece of history. It is collectible. It is nicely smelt. We were joking about this earlier, but as we were unpacking and setting up, you can smell the age of the circuitry. You can smell the wood. It has this vintage smell, good or bad. It's got a different feel, a different smell. This has a new synth smell. It's not a fragrance yet, but very different smell. So there's a sense of kind of aura that you get when you play on a vintage instrument, and it really is beautiful. It's bigger. The wood is giant. The metal is huge. It's just aesthetically different, and it is the value seems to be stable and growing for whatever reason. I think values, it's an irrational measure of what we value as collectively, and I don't think it's a bad investment from a collector standpoint. From a musical standpoint, I would say I think you can get the sound from a Model D, a Poly D, or one of Moog's new products. You can get that classic Moog sound and also modern features that allow it to integrate via USB and via MIDI, as well as an arpeggiator and sequencer and other cool features and effects. So that's kind of my opinion, but let's play them both, and you can kind of decide, is it close? Is it cooler? Is it less cool? We'll let you listen, and you can give us your opinion, and then I'll give you my opinion at the end, and yeah, let's go from there. So what do you think? Do synths age like fine wine? Is it noticeably different than a modern clone? I think in a sense, when you look at it from a historical standpoint and from the kind of spiritual legacy of the original Minimoog, I think the answer is yes. You know, the impact this instrument has had on music and music history is undeniable, and it's gotten richer over time. Artists have continued to find ways to use and reinvent the use of this Moog tone. But from an instrument standpoint, the question is harder to answer. You know, I would preface it by saying that Roland, in some of their recent emulation kind of technology, has put a parameter called age that you can turn up on their vintage synth modeling to kind of change the tone. And so you can discern a tonal difference with the circuitry aging, with just the changes that happen over time inside of these units. But the question is that fine wine? Or is that sour wine? You know, is that something that enriches enough musically to make it a good investment at $4,000 or $5,000 from a musical standpoint? Or are you much better off going with a replica or a kind of reimagination or recreation with the newer Moog products? So the question only you can answer. Personally, I think the newer products are probably a better choice musically. From a cool standpoint, I definitely see the Minimoog as something that's a trophy piece on the wall or in the studio. But from a functional musical standpoint, I'm very much more a proponent of newer replicas of the Moog. And I think there's really great ones out there. So that's kind of where I'll leave it. And if you have any comments, please leave them below. Again, if you found this helpful or want to hear more topics like this, please hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications. If we can do anything better, leave a comment below. And again, I'm Zach Marr from Alamo Music here in San Antonio, Texas. You can, if you want to chat with us about synths, go on our website and chat with us, or give us a call, email us. Love to hear from you. And hope you have a great day.